Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bearded Mystic podcast, and I'm your host Rahul N Singh. So today we're gonna talk about something which I told you about yesterday, and we would do because America is in a state where if you had to look up the definition of dharma and karma, the leadership that is in all branches of government, whether that's judicial, whether that's Congress, including the Senate and the presidency, it's all compromised. Yesterday, the only people that benefited from that state of division speech, because let's be honest, America is divided. It's not united, and that was proven in November. But the only two people that were really proud of that speech was Putin and Elon Musk. And frankly, Elon Musk should have delivered half of that speech because he's kind of running the show. He's the one thing they deny, but Trump admitted that he is. He's leading Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is causing havoc. It's going to reduce people's social security, Medicaid, but unfortunately, if you voted for Trump, you kind of get what's coming. But the people that didn't, you don't deserve this, and this is why you must speak up. So we're going to look at this from a non-dual perspective. Now, when he gave his speech to Congress, his address to Congress, the convicted felon, he made several statements which were factually incorrect, and we're going to go through a few of those in a bit later. And whether he was speaking about immigration, to economic conditions, to energy resources and transgender rights, he literally was just speaking misinformation like there was no other business. And if anyone had to fact check, it would be such a difficult job, because how are you meant to fact check someone who's a serial liar who tells 3 lies per minute, and the person who is having to fact check literally gets overwhelmed? But what you should do if you've got a brain cell, and unfortunately there are people who come onto this channel and like to defend the indefensible convicted felon, well, all I say is, why don't you look at fact checking? Because you know what, it can be beneficial to you. And now, whenever these inaccuracies are talked about, whenever they are politically spoken of or even hinted towards, let's be honest, they have real consequences. They erode public trust. We're seeing this with immigrants. It deepens divisions. We see this very clearly. And it distorts the shared reality. And this was very obvious from the moment we experienced COVID. I mean, before, things were rather kind of, you didn't see it as distorted. But after COVID, the way the MAGA Republicans denied the reality of COVID is despicable. And the amount of misinformation they shared, especially from people like Joe Rogan, who is a sellout and is none other than someone who is swimming in the ocean of misinformation. They have distorted the shared reality. They have deepened divisions, and most of all, public trust in government goes down. Now, this is exactly what Trump wants. The convicted felon wants you to not trust government so it can keep cutting the government down and therefore create a gap. And then when people cannot live a good life, he can then control them. The whole point is to control. He is a natural born dictator. He wants to be a dictator. He's aiming to be a dictator. And he's surely bringing that about. From now, let's look at a factual standpoint, and let's be very honest, because we're going to look at this from a non-dual perspective, yeah? So Trump's claims about illegal border crossings being at a historic lows, well, or inheriting a failing economy, and the US having the largest oil and gas reserves are crazily, demonstrably false. Data from independent agencies, yeah? This is not from left-leaning people or right-leaning people, contradicts these assertions, and they reveal a pattern of exaggeration and misinformation. This is seen with Trump. He exaggerates and he misinforms and he bombards us with information like that, and that's why it's really hard to keep up with him. Now, his remarks on transgender rights, framing that gender-affirming care is widespread and unregulated, and insisting on a binary understanding of gender, that there's only male and female, it just ignores the established medical and scientific consensus. And anyone that thinks, oh, there's so many transgender people, they're in our sports, you know what? Grab a book and read. You know what? That's what you're lacking. And, I can't believe you can even just go by someone who cannot read himself, actually. So, use your brain a little. Yeah. Check things out. And so these falsehoods that he spoke about yesterday, they don't just mislead, which is considerably, weirdly enough, minor in this. It just sows discord, it deepens misunderstandings and strips dignity from already communities that are marginalized, that are seen as lesser human beings. And this is something I don't think from any spiritual perspective you can support. I'm sorry, if you claim to be spiritual and you're okay with that speech yesterday, you need to check your spirituality out, because I'm telling you right now, you cannot support this on any level. Especially from the East. There's certainly, even from Jesus. Jesus would be horrified at this. Forget the Sermon on the Mount. You probably would be like, that's so woke. But you know what? By the way, on this channel, we're happy to be woke. We're happy if it means to care about people and put people on an equal level, and you find that to be woke. Well, I'm glad to be woke, and I'm happy to be woke, because I don't want to be a crybaby like you anti-woke people who cry at the hint of equality playing out. Like literally, you cry like little babies, and crying about transgender rights. Where, tell me, I don't even know any person personally who's going through this, so it's not a lived reality for me. I know someone who is I know a friend of mine who knows someone who is transgender, and the fact that that person cannot have rights, that's disgusting. I'm totally against that. I don't care what you think. How can you turn around and say that person's wrong for what they feel? Like, who are you? Who are you to say that? Literally, who are you? Like, disgusting. But anyway, back to the crazy boy, convicted felon. But let's give you the non-dual perspective, because, you see, when it comes to misinformation, we need to understand that it's problematic. From a non-dual perspective, it's really problematic. Yeah, because non-duality really teaches us that reality is not divided in rigid opposites. So you can't be like, this, we're not there to be like, this is true and false, right and wrong, and us and them. That stuff is not done. There's not an us and them, especially that one, especially. When it comes to the world, yes, there are certain things where we know to be factually true and factually wrong, or false. But when it comes to the us and them, that's not cool. When you create division like that, that's not non-duality. So what we emphasize, and what this podcast continuously will emphasize, is that we're an interconnected completeness. We are Purnam. We are a whole community where clarity and truth and awareness emerge when we see beyond these artificial divisions sowed by people like the convicted felon and his MAGA Republicans. So misinformation, by contrast, actually thrives on fragmentation, doesn't tell you the complete truth, tells you a partial truth, and then finds a way to blow that up over proportion, and so you believe that nonsense. Yeah, because you're already being affected by the convicted felons' issues, but you don't want to deal with that. You don't want to deal with the fact that your hero is none other than the biggest villain on the planet, is making a bigger swamp than he inherited. And trust me, by doing all these cuts, he's not cutting the swamp. It's creating a bigger swamp of oligarchy. So anyway, this ultimately, puts people in ideological camps. And we've seen this with COVID. We've seen this with anti-vax people. And, it puts them into whether you believe in science or you don't believe in science. Like, what nonsense are we coming to where the scientific consensus is, vaccines work? And the fact that we have to defend that point is so stupid, so silly. And all this does is, on both sides, it creates the fear of the other, and therefore it kind of obscures the fact that we're all one fabric of existence. We all come from the same source. But how can you believe that when so many human beings, so many people, over 70,000 people believe in someone who spread misinformation on a daily basis, on a minute-to-minute basis? How can you actually see the wholeness, the same fabric of existence with those people? And that's why, there's such thing as righteous anger. This anger where we want everyone to be given the same rights. That anger which is not about harming other people, but actually about reducing the harm for others. That's what this is about. So, frankly, whenever there's a leader that distorts the truth, just like the convicted felon continuously does, and his co-president Musk, they reinforce the illusion of separateness. They set up conflicts between citizens, between us Republicans and Democrats. They erode mutual trust. Frankly, I do find it difficult to trust someone who voted for Trump. I do. I frankly do. It's a lot of work where I've had to understand that they don't represent who they vote. But even if they did vote for him, they have all the tools available right now to see that their voting was wrong, and they should if they're men, they should man up and just admit they made the wrong decision. Because trust me, it's going to stay with you. And if you're a woman and you voted for Trump, you go also woman up and admit that you voted for someone who wants to take your rights away. So we will never come to an authentic connection and understanding until we admit what is the truth. When we and this is on the media too. The media groveling to Trump, is ridiculous. The media should be separate. The media should be independent, and it should not be groveling to anyone, and it should just keep its kind of premise, its existence based on facts alone, not opinion pieces, facts. And no way should oligarchs like Bezos dictate what should be said in the news and not. And if things are an opinion, then it needs to be open that it's an opinion and not fact. But when it comes to actual reporting events, it should be purely fact-based. So from a non-dual perspective, yes, misinformation misleads, but it creates a world where people act from delusion rather than from wisdom. If you have someone that's anti-vax, they're so deluded you cannot talk to them in wisdom. And neither will they be able to understand the non-dual Brahman or the formless awareness if they lack that common sense, that common intellect. So, and their policies will be based on fear rather than knowledge. Same thing with immigrants. They'd be like, oh, there's too many people taking our jobs. No, there isn't. If you want, no immigrant is after my job, and you need to, and if there is a lack of jobs, then you need to speak to your local representatives and make sure you're heard. Because I bet you're just typing this up on Facebook or Instagram or X and not actually dealing with the issues. So from a non-dual perspective, truth is not just merely, factual accuracy. That's one part of it. But it's a state of clarity which allows individuals and societies to function in harmony. And this is something that Trump does not want to happen. That convicted felon does not care about you. He only cares about him and his billionaire bros. So, when we think about this, leadership at its highest should always guide us towards truth and not away from it. The fact that he, like I mentioned yesterday, he banned the AP from the White House briefings, that means he doesn't want people to go towards truth. He wants people to be away from it. If we're a society and we're honest in saying that we want unity and we want to prioritize honesty, transparency, and inclusive understanding of reality, then that's what we've got to say. We've got to prioritize those things and say, this is what we want from our government. This is what we want from our government officials. This is what we want from our representatives. If they're not honest, if they're not transparent, and if they do, and they are not inclusive, we don't want them in government. Simple as that. Anyone who's dishonest, who puts a veil on truth, who puts a veil on the reality, who creates division, that person should be nowhere near government office. Nowhere near. And misinformation, whether it's intentional or not, or maybe the convicted felon is really stupid. I mean, it's possible, but it is a form of veiling reality. And again, if non-duality is about seeing reality as it is, you cannot be in misinformation. You got to have an intellect that is sharp. That Vivek has to be sharp, where you can see misinformation and not fall under that trap. Yeah, it's easy actually. It just requires a bit of time for reading. That's all. So by doing this misinformation, it keeps people trapped in projection, and you see that play out on social media. It's all projection. None of it is based on truth, and whoever speaks the truth, their content is always hidden. So if we are going to move beyond divisions that such rhetoric creates, then we must cultivate discernment. We must cultivate vivek. We must cultivate wisdom. We must cultivate compassion. That compassion to see everyone as ourselves. Yeah, love thy neighbor. That's something that Jesus said. I bet a lot of Christians have forgotten that, who voted for the convicted felon. And guess what? Your neighbor's also an immigrant. That's what Jesus meant. He didn't actually physically mean your neighbor. He meant anyone that you come across is your own. So love them. And a commitment to seeing reality as it is. And that's why I use Ground News. I'm not sponsored by them, but I tell you, use Ground News. It tells you the factuality. It tells you where the sources come from, who owns a newspaper. It tells you everything you need to know. Pay for the subscription so you can see how you can be misled easily. And you can see how other people are misled easily by looking at that. So that way, you know that you're not falling under the trap where, it's when you see reality as it is, rather than seeing how politically convenient it is to portray a projection. So, you want to see reality as it is. You want to see the truth. So in confronting misinformation, it's not just about simply correcting facts. It's about dissolving delusion completely. So the path to a more just, compassionate, and united world lies in recognizing the interconnected nature of all beings, all of us, not just in America, everywhere, and refusing to be misled by narratives that seek to divide rather than reveal the inherent unity that underlies everything. But right now, that's what I believe from a non-dual perspective. Do I believe the Democrats should do that? No. I think the Democrats should equally push the narrative that we're all one and we want to treat people with compassion, and this is how we're going to do it. What he's doing is seeking division. We've got to make it clear. But anyway, so I promised you that I would look at some of the claims that he made. So the convicted felon claimed that the illegal border crossings were at their lowest. So fact checking that, it's inaccurate. While there have been fluctuations, data does not support the assertion that crossings are at historic lows. So, there's that. So Trump also claimed, the convicted felon, that he inherited a dire economy upon taking office from Biden. And this is false, because key economic indicators such as employment and growth were strong prior to his presidency. Biden did actually quite well. Yeah. And by the way, the egg prices are still going up under Trump. He's done nothing to bring them down. He promised he would, but he hasn't done that. Our grocery bill's still going up. He hasn't done anything with that, so just letting you know. Trump also claims that the US possesses more oil and natural gas reserves than any other nation. And again, incorrect. Other countries have larger estimated oil and natural gas reserves than the US. So, Social Security. Yeah, this is a crazy one, because him and Musk have doubled down on this. He suggested that many centenarians, people over 100, have received Social Security benefits due to database quirks. This is misleading. While there are database issues, they do not result in a significant number of improper payments. That's not happening. People who are dead aren't getting paid. He claims that he's ended the federal electric vehicle mandate, and that's incorrect, because there was never any federal mandate. It was a non-binding goal set by the previous administration. And Trump also states that, and this is the ridiculous one, and this is what I mean, like Trump states that not long ago, only 1 in 10,000 children were diagnosed with autism, whereas now it's 1 in 36. Okay, so the fact check here is the 1 in 10,000 figure dates back several decades before the definition and awareness of autism expanded. The current estimate of 1 in 36 reflects improved diagnosis and broader criteria, not necessarily an actual increase in prevalence. And this is what happens when you can't think for yourself, and people blame it on vaccines. You see how dumb it is to think that. The common sense is we got better ways of reporting this today. It's ridiculous. The Panama Canal, let's look at that one. He claims that 38,000 American workers died during the construction of the Panama Canal, and that Panama ceded control of the canal to China. Fact check is this: approximately 5,600 workers died during the American construction phase, not 38,000. So very big misleading there. And Panama controls the canal. It has not been ceded to China. So again, massive misinformation, and he doesn't really care. Trump claims that Doge has found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, and the Doge website states that the department has generated 105 billions in savings, with evidence supporting only 19.8 billion of that total. It's unclear how much, if any, is related to fraud. But the fraud is that he claims it's 105 billion in savings. That's a fraud. That Elon Musk is claiming that. And then also, he claims that inflation was perhaps the worst in history under President Joe Biden, and that's incorrect. because while inflation rates did rise, they were not the worst in US history. And this is why he's so silly. And I just want to say that Trump obviously referred to gender affirming surgeries, and that it's chemical and surgical mutilation, and suggests that all of these procedures are widespread and performed without proper oversight. That characterization is incorrect. The American Medical Association and American Academy of Pediatrics recognize gender affirming care as evidence-based and medically necessary for transgender youth. Additionally, surgical interventions for minors are exceedingly rare. The majority of gender affirming care for adolescents involves non-surgical treatments such as puberty blockers and hormone therapy administered under strict medical guidelines. So not everyone's just getting that type of care just like that. So he mentions that that he's made it official policy for the American government to say there's only two genders, male and female. But let's be honest, this policy that he's claiming contradicts established medical and scientific understanding, which acknowledges a spectrum of gender identities beyond a strict male and female binary. This is science. Yeah, this is not a political motivated thing that the Democrats did. But you can see that was just a bit of the lies that he said. And all I can say is I've said a lot today, but I want you to understand from a non-dual perspective that all this craziness is just going to continue. It's only been 6 weeks and it's going to get worse. All we have to do is, 1, remember to remain in formless awareness, number 1. 2, always keep your intellect alert and keep yourself away from biased understanding, whether that's from the left and the right, or the center. Just make sure that everything you read is factually based, and wherever there is factual inaccuracies, do not read that, and certainly do not repeat that. And the other thing I'm going to say is also stay away from social media. I think it's time for people to stop using social media. I don't think it's benefiting anyone. But if you are using social media, do not be shy in utilizing your voice for the truth. That's all. And anyone that wants to comment on supporting the convicted felon and his government and all these other people, you can do so. I don't care. I will hit back. And also, if you want to look at people who've given a good take on what's happened, I particularly love I've Had It podcast, iHip News. They're pretty good. Bernie Sanders did a response, brilliant as always. And look up anyone else like Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk. He did a great analysis, and so did Pod Save America. So this is time that we really think about keeping our sanity. And remember, stick with the truth, and the truth will stay with you. Okay, take care everyone. Namaste.